All right, folks. I just got done with breakfast. I'm recording this immediately after the live stream that we just wrapped up. Well, I guess this is going out on Monday mornings, so that's not truly the case because we did the live stream on Sunday. So I'm recording this at 10:30 a.m. on Sunday, January 15th, but it's coming out at 6 a.m. as a premiere on Monday morning. And I mentioned this article. It's over at Gizmodo, and it is an interview with Paizo President Jim Butler as he reveals plans for their universal RPG license, the ORC, the system-neutral open game creative license. And there's a lot of stuff that's going into this and a lot of questions that we don't have answers for yet, but it is a great, so this is sort of an insider view, if you will, into the president's POV as opposed to the interpretation that many people are taking away from the original Paizo announcement. So we're going to dive into that today as we get going here, as I promised we would. A quick reminder, if you like these conversations, I'm pretty much every single morning doing these at 6 a.m. Central Time, and I'm usually in the chat area of the premiere, hanging out, chatting with people. So feel free to ask questions while I'm here, comments, whatever you want to do, and I'll get to other topics as people ask me to cover them. You can also do super chats on these premieres or super thanks after the fact. Memberships are below. We'll talk more at the end about other stuff, but in the meantime, let's dive into this interview. So the orc obviously was announced a few days ago, and pretty much I think the universal reaction to that was applause because it came at the tail end of like a week long radio silence period from Wizards of the Coast on their OGL updates, and furthermore, they then later on the same day canceled their plans to release the updated language and their video announcement and have now gone back into their caves to continue drafting whatever's going to be the new language of their upcoming OGL 2.0 draft. But in the meantime, we got this great statement by Paizo talking about we're going to be doing this with other gaming publishers. Here's what it's going to be. Now, a lot of people made assumptions based off of that video. One of the common themes that I saw that came out of that, at least on my channel, maybe that's on me for the way I talked about it, I don't know, but one of the common things I saw talked about on my channel was people who were assuming that ORC is also a rule set, and it's not. If you go back to the original press release, it says system neutral license is what they're building here. And that's reiterated here, and I think it's important for people to understand that distinction because I know that it's confusing because of the fact that the OGL is also heavily tied to the D20 system that D&D has been using for years, and everyone who did D&D or OGL related products was using that same D20 system, and Pathfinder is based off of the OGL on the D20 system. So I think a lot of people, at least from what I've seen, have made that assumption that the open game license was also including some sort of a rule set, but it's not. It's system agnostic. And they talk about that more here in this interview. So let's just dive in. So Paizo announced, obviously, that it would be financially supporting an initiative to establish their open RPG creative license, otherwise known as the ORC. They do not intend to keep this license. It's one of the things we talked about in the live stream. That is such a commendable action because it's truly open source, and it's going to be in the stewardship of the legal company that's putting this all together over at Azora Law Group. And for me, and this is on a personal level, I think one of the reasons that this to me established them as the clear winners of this war, because it is a war, was the fact that they are committed to this being open for everyone forever. Forever. And that to me speaks volumes because that's not what Wizards of the Coast was attempting to do. They were attempting to rescind old language and create a new version, and they're still trying to do that because they really, really want that OGL 1.0 and 1.0A dead. They want their new version in effect so that they can firmly lock down and control and monetize every last little nook and cranny of their customer base. Because at the end of the day, they don't really care about the worlds of tabletop and the imaginations of these millions of players around the world. They care about how can we capitalize on and monetize our 80% whatever market share that it was before they made all these crazy announcements that have made now Wizards of the Coast is the most hated. I would say that they and Hasbro are probably arguably one of the most disliked entities based on current trends, but that could change. You never know. In any case, Paizo made an announcement that was completely in the reverse of that and said, no, well, this is going to be free forever. So they mentioned here, Linda from IO9 does the interview here. How long has the ORC been in the works? I'm scrolling to make sure I didn't miss anything. How long has ORC been in the works? And he mentions that as far back as them putting together the second edition of the Pathfinder game, because they were by that point already moving far beyond the original OGL. And it said here, we started our new edition with a blank slate, decoupling our game mechanics from the copyrighted materials and prior SRDs in order to chart a new path. When we published the second edition under the OGL, it was because the OGL had, for more than 20 years, proven itself to be a safe harbor for publishers. The media controversy surrounding Wizards' plans has made it clear that that safe harbor that may have existed before was in jeopardy, and we then started discussing our options with the Zora Law, and the ORC was born. And this is the key I want to talk about. Will the ORC be attached to any specific system reference documents, or will it be a larger framework? And he says, Butler says the Open RPG Creative License is envisioned as a broader framework along the lines of the GNU or Creative Commons, in which companies may independently deposit their own system reference documents. In that sense, it is not tied to a single system or a small set of systems, and importantly, is not owned by a single RPG publisher. There are already a number of major companies signed up for the ORC license, so it won't launch without content, and more importantly, the content will grow over time, safe from outside influences. So I think this is very important because whereas the OGL is firmly locked in place with D&D's system, their system reference document for the D20 system that they've developed, the ORC is independent of any one SRD. And so there will be multiple SRDs that are a part of this as it moves forward. So I think what you're going to be seeing here is, for example, Cobalt Press has its Black Flag initiative that they're working on. That's an open source system that they're going to be creating, that they are creating, and they're going to have an SRD for that system. And from what I understand, because they are participating in the ORC, they will then be making their system reference document and whatever world is associated with that sort of part of this open source. Obviously, they will have their intellectual property that's theirs and that they profit from. But as far as the SRD goes and everything else, they'll be making that available for people to use under this open source license. He also gives some good insight into the timelines here, because it's I would estimate that this will be middle of the year before this truly gets into place. Because as he mentions here, they expect to have a draft out for feedback in February, and a final iteration depends upon publisher feedback, finding or establishing the right foundation to protect the ORC, setting some standards agreeable to all publishers, and other elements vital to the long-term health of the ORC. Ultimately, the timeline will be driven by the Zora Law, and they won't release the final version until ready. If they're moving on a really rapid timeline, we could see something by the end of April. I would say most people should set their sights on summer, June, July, because even if they prioritize this, again, the draft gets there in February. Give them a month to go through the draft and nail down any final thoughts for that next draft. Then they get into March. They might do the final draft in March. Give everybody a month to review that and nail down any last minute things they want, and then maybe March publish. I would say March, April at the earliest. Like end of March, early April would be the earliest we see this. But again, they're talking here about how they really want to move quickly, so that all of these content creators, and there are thousands of them who grew up, or not grew up as in grew up, but built their businesses around the OGL, to make sure that these people can be protected as quickly as possible with a truly open source license that's not going to pirate off of their hard work and try to steal their money or steal their intellectual property. So they're trying to get this out the door as quickly as possible. They talk about here what kind of community input they're looking for. They specifically want to make sure that the final license covers the needs of as many publishers as possible to cover any potential pitfalls. What they don't want is any future owner of a particular company or a novel legal theory to come along that attempts to undo the clear and unequivocal intent of the original contract. Avoiding that requires attention to detail and feedback from our fellow publishers to make sure that the license works for everybody. And there are some comments here about, their take on Wizards of the Coast's OGL update. Um, Said here, open game license was meant to benefit all game companies in the hobby game space. As a leader in that space, Wizards has the largest network of players and therefore has most positively benefited by the OGL. We're baffled by the business rationale that drove the leaked OGL 1.1 and the negative impact the entire hobby industry that its loss would create. We're all baffled, sir. Like none of us understand why they did what they did. It's like someone at the top just has no clue what their audience really is, who their audience really is, and what they're made up of. They're literally just looking at numbers on a chart and saying, we're a $1 billion plus company. How can we make even more money? And I think this is where you get in my mind, a clear delineation of where the greed stepped in and began to overrun common sense. Because common sense would say, leave it alone. You've grown from a, you know, I don't know what their income was like in the 80s and 90s, but it went from being bankrupt to be bought by Wizards of the Coast to starting off as a small company that was making some millions, but it wasn't making hundreds of millions. And then over time, it grew to making hundreds of millions and then $1 billion plus, and off of the backs of the Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons stuff. And it's like, why would you get greedy? Like, I kind of feel like this is also kind of like looking at the FTX situation with Sam Fried Bankman or whatever his name is, of watching FTX just grow at such a rapid pace that it fell underneath the weight of its own pretentiousness. And I feel like that's what happened here with Wizards of the Coast is they just got so big that they thought nothing could touch us. Like we are the unconquerable Dungeons and Dragons. Let's do this. And they're just so out of touch with reality. It's crazy. Um anyway, how will the ORC allow for greater accessibility to TRPG? It says it's not going to be limited to just print books and static PDFs. That's very important. As technology changes, publishers will be empowered to take advantage of the same license and spread their works far and wide. From AR, VR to virtual tabletops, from screen readers to narrated novels, the OpenRPG creative license will let publishers plot their own course and open their works to legions of fans who otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to know about them. Because that was ultimately the other thing that Wizards was trying to lock down, was they were trying to tell people and they haven't, by the way, have not addressed this in the 2.0 update they did the other day. At least I don't remember seeing it. They're trying to tell you where you can and can't publish your content, that leaked language of the 1.1. They were literally saying, well, you're only allowed to do tabletop campaigns and source books and PDFs. That's it. You can't do anything else. You are not allowed to do video games. You're not allowed to do TV shows. You can't do streaming. You can't do pantomime. You can't do comic books. You can't do anything other than books and PDFs. Those are the only things we're allowing you to do. Well, that's not an open license. That's literally a merchandising license. You're telling people what they can and can't merchandise. That's not open. So for me, the decision was clear because everything we've done with the Weave and the Void, this originally was designed as a point and click adventure game. That's what it started off as. Was my brother and I going, what can we get out in the next couple of years after spending 7 years working on an MMORPG? And we went a point and click adventure game because it only needs the two of us, maybe a third person contractor from time to time, but we don't need a big team to do it, and we can get that out relatively quickly. And then that became we need lore. Okay, well, what could we do? Do we write a book series? We did that before with the MMORPG. There was a book series, and then it became, it started off as a tabletop game, and then a book series, and then an MMORPG. So with this, we started kind of in reverse and said, video game, book series, and well, hell, while we're at it, we might as well build a tabletop world at the same time. And so that sort of became this thing where we were building everything all at the same time, all three things at once. And for Wizards of the Coast to sit there and try to claim that because we were using the OGL 1.0A, and that if we wanted to keep using the OGL, they were only going to allow us to do the tabletop component, and we weren't going to be allowed to do our point and click adventure game or the book series that we're doing through Patreon. Yeah, that's a big no. Hell no. You don't get to dictate to me what I do with my own intellectual property. No. So it's a no-brainer for me. Now, obviously, we still haven't seen the final language of the orc system. I'm fairly confident that's going to give us the things we want to see. But at the end of the day, it's not that big of a deal if it doesn't, because you can still go system agnostic and just not have any license material in your products in the first place and make it all your own and have it be system agnostic, truly independently system agnostic, and go from there. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm very interested in the ORC, and I think it's going to be bringing good things to the table. I have faith because I think that all the companies involved are stand-up companies, and we're going to wait and see. I don't know. In any case, if you like this video, like, subscribe, hit the bell icon. Hopefully you're here with us every Monday, not every Monday, but just every morning at 6 a.m. as we do these premieres. I'm usually in the chat. So while you're here, if you want to support, you can with a super chat on premieres, super thanks on uploads. You can join as a member, 3 different tiers. Please support. I've been doing this full time since June of 2022 because of the support of the community members, and hopefully I can keep doing this forever. But it does depend on your support because the advertising revenue doesn't pay that much. So do all those things. Check out our Patreon page for our products. Join the Discord. And we'll see you tomorrow morning for the next update as we continue onwards with this and other things. Until then, happy gaming, everybody.